Hey everybody, I'm Justin, and today I'm going to show you how we're going to take this ugly textured wall and make it smooth wall. The first thing we did was remove any hardware from around the windows. We removed cover plates from electrical outlets, and then we also wiped down all the walls. I'm going to be using an all-purpose joint compound for the first two layers. People also call it plaster or drywall mud, FYI. Then I will use a smoother mix called topping for the final layer. It comes in a bucket with a blue lid. So these are a couple of the main tools I'm going to use, but this one is a 10-inch drywall knife, and you can see there's a little bit of curve to it. This outside curve is going to be up against the wall like that. And I'll show you some techniques that I use when I do it. And then this one is an 8-inch. So the bigger knife, the better for putting on this first layer of joint compound. And we're actually putting this over the top of existing painted texture. So I'm just gonna put it on kind of rough. I'm not gonna worry about being too smooth. I just want to worry about getting enough plaster inside these pockets of texture so that it covers over the top. It might take 3 or 4 layers to get it exactly smooth the way we want it, but I'm just going to start. But I'm just kind of lightly putting pressure on it, just enough to get all of this smooth out. You can see it's going to take a lot of mud to get this wall smooth. So we just got to do that with this whole room. It was nice to have help on this first layer. My helper had never drywalled before, so I had him start applying plaster, and then I would follow behind him and smooth it out. We are 3/4 of the way through a bucket already. We've gone over halfway now. And this is how much plaster you can see is on the wall. And that'll start to dry and start to look like a smooth wall. What I'm going to do right now is focus on the corners. I want to get those nice and crisp. So I'm going to put some mud up and down the corners, and let me show you how it's looking right now. So you can see this mud is just kind of put in there really quick. Not too fancy, but what I'm going to do is take this, I'm going to fill this with mud and here, all the way up and down. And then I'm gonna take the corner tool that I have and just smooth it out. Then I'm gonna take my bigger knife and I'm just gonna feather that edge. Put some pressure on the right side of this and just kind of float over that edge and flatten that out. But I don't want to get too close to the corner with my tool and gouge that out. There are a couple of bumps, we can go in and sand that. Between these layers, I used a damp sponge to smooth out the wall instead of using a sander to keep the dust down. So I did end up going and buying a bigger drywall knife. I bought a 12-inch knife, and this allowed me to apply more plaster at a time to make the project go quicker. I used up the second bucket of the all-purpose joint compound and added a little bit of water to it to smooth it out. And now I'm starting to use the topping bucket for these last 2 layers. I'll have a link in the description below where I'll have a list of all the tools and materials that I've used for this project. It's also important to remember while applying the plaster to make sure that curved portion of the tool is up against the wall so you don't have any lines coming off the edges of the tool. For the last layer, I added plastic to the doorway and turned off the air in the house before sanding. Sanding creates a lot of dust, and I wanted to keep it contained in the room. On this layer, I ended up using the vacuum sander to go over the wall really quick before I did the final coat. So what I did is I mixed up some water to thin it out a little bit, because this is the final coat and it's going on really nice. Just one last smooth layer, and then tomorrow we'll come back and sand it. Because we're plastering over the top of walls that have been painted many times, you're gonna get areas where you're gonna have a lot of bubbles, and it's gonna look a lot like this. And the way to avoid that is to just put more layers of plaster on top of that, sand it in between, and eventually all those holes will be covered up. This is our 3rd layer of plaster, and it's our final layer. So right now I'm taking this spongy sanding block, and I'm basically sanding over the entire surface, and that way I make sure I get rid of stuff like this, little imperfections in the putting on the last layer of plaster. But with the sanding block, all this stuff's gonna go away. This is what picks up a lot of dust. I could use that other attachment that I have, but it doesn't have a sponginess on the yellow part, so it scratches it more. But I found that these sponges work really well, and it makes a nice smooth surface. So all I'm gonna do is go through and smooth out the last layer. So once the paint layer goes on, we're gonna do a drywall paint on top of this, and then we're gonna do the white paint on top of the drywall paint. And stuff like this, you'll never see it. And so having a light also shining across the surface really helps to be able to show us where the scratches are or the imperfections in order to get those sanded smooth. So I'm really pleased with how it's turning out. We're gonna be putting up paint today, and we won't have to do drywall for a while, so that's a good thing.